Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Broken Brains with your host, Bruce Parkman, sponsored by the Mac Parkman Foundation, where we look at the issue of repetitive brain trauma in two forms: repetitive head impacts from contact sports and repetitive blast exposure from our military veterans, and what these two conditions are doing to the brain health and mental well being of our veterans, kids, and athletes around this country. The issue is, most importantly, is that the issue of repetitive brain trauma and the connections to mental illness is not taught in our psychological, medical, nursing, or suicide prevention courses, which makes you the first line of defense in this issue. So we bring on the leading researchers and scientists and players and patients and doctors and authors to talk about this issue so that you get that 360-degree perspective of it so that you can make informed decisions about those that you love or that those that you know that could be suffering. On the show today, another esteemed guest, Mr. Kurt A. David, is an Emmy Award-winning TV host, producer, and author, best known for From Glory Days, the acclaimed television series and book highlighting how Hall of Fame and world champion athletes successfully transition after professional sports. A former professional basketball player, Kurt reinvented his career by developing the 5 rules, a framework for navigating rapid change. These principles propelled his success as the founder of the Glory Days Productions and co-founder of PurposePoint.com, and author of 2 books on transition and personal empowerment. Kurt's transition strategies have been adopted by leaders and organizations worldwide. He has presented to hundreds of companies, to include Amcor, Morepace, Blue Cross Blue Shield, financial institutions, medical organizations, and government agencies, helping teams reconnect with purpose and thrive through change. Kurt, welcome to the show, sir.
Bruce, it's an honor. Thank you for having me.
Man, glad to have you here, sir. So tell us a little about yourself. Where did you grow up, man? What was your journey through childhood that got you into professional sports?
No, I appreciate that. I always tell people you can't talk about me without talking about my foundation. And my foundation was I grew up, there was 8 of us in a house in northern Michigan with 1 bathroom. So you learn early on in life that life is not about you when you have 8 of you in a house with 1 bathroom. And so very different to today's standard. A lot of people, if they don't have their own bathroom or bedroom, something's wrong. But yeah, the funny part is, Bruce, is that all 6 of us kids, there was 8 of us, 2 parents and then 6 kids, all 6 of us kids were on full ride athletic scholarship and 2 of us played professionally. So imagine that household growing up, extremely competitive, right? The good news is my mom was a teacher and a coach and an athletic director at the local private school that we all attended. And so we had keys to the gym anytime that we wanted. And I attribute that to the 10,000 hours that we all needed to get to that highest level. And so we were in the gym every day, Christmas Day after opening presents, Thanksgiving after eating a big dinner. The nice thing is that we had access like that. And so we're very fortunate, but very competitive household. My father was a director of social services for the county, so kind of a give back. And then I mentioned about my mother being a coach and teacher and athletic director, obviously serving others as well. And so that was ingrained and it's in the marrow of my bone as a result of serving others. And so that was my foundation growing up.
Okay. And so what kind of sports did you play when you were in school? Were you just focused on basketball, or are you one of those 2 and 3 sports players that we hardly see in high school anymore?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because I think to probably frame that is in 7th grade, I was 5'11", and by the end of my 8th grade year, I was 6'5". And so I grew 6 inches in that time frame, and it was very painful, but also kind of steered me towards a certain direction. So basketball became my sport. You know, the great news is I was dunking in 8th grade, and I ended up being 6'9" is what I am now. You can't tell on a podcast, but I'm 6'9" tall. So horse jockey didn't quite work out for me. So basketball was the next best thing. But yeah, all five of the 6 kids played college basketball, and like I said, 2 of us played pro. And my older sister was the runt of the litter. She was only 5'6", so she ran track at a Division I school. That was her sport. And so, yeah, basketball was our most of the sports, but we played wiffle ball growing up, all different sports, football in the backyard, you know, whatever it took at that time. And so it was great. It was one of those times where you didn't come home unless it was dark or you were hungry, right? I mean, that's the upbringing that I had up in northern Michigan.
Back when your kids were allowed to roam the streets and you weren't worried about them, you just I can remember my stepmom just yeah, we would wait for there's the dinner bell. Brucey! She would start screaming. We'd all have it was all time to go home. So so basketball it was. And where'd you play basketball in college?
Yeah, I played high school, played at Division II up in Saginaw Valley State. Literally, when I was looking at college opportunities, I wanted to come in and play right away. So I came in, started as a freshman at that school. As most athletes, so you have this turbulent time, right? There's a chip in the armor, so to speak, as far as confidence. And I wish it was a pure ride the whole 4 years that I was there, but it was a roller coaster ride. Fortunately, at the end of my senior year in college, I had an opportunity to play overseas. I was working a couple basketball camps, and one of the guys there played over in Europe, and he coached actually over in Europe. And he says, "Hey, you're pretty good. Would you be interested in coming over to Europe and play?" And I didn't have to think twice about that. So I had an opportunity to play overseas. It wasn't the NBA, but certainly it was something that when you get paid to do something that you love, how can you complain? And travel and see the world on their dime, so to speak. It was great, great opportunity. The only problem, Bruce, is that I was going to be 5,000 miles away from my family and friends in a country whose language I didn't speak. So, and I really didn't know what to expect as far as basketball, but it was a great experience. We went undefeated in a league that first year. Literally, I was, I don't know, 24, 25 points a game. Living the life of a rock star, no question about it. But as we know in pro sports or any sport, at some point it is ultimately over. And as I tell people, 100% of professional athletes ultimately lose their job at some point.
Amen. What country did you play in?
I was in Germany. Yeah, but got to travel
Germany.
all over. Yeah, we played in France and Austria and, Belgium, a lot of the neighboring countries as well, and got to see some of the other countries when I was over there. And so, yeah, it was a great experience, really. But as I tell people, that was 40 pounds ago. I don't go by years, I go by pounds. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
that was
Amen.
40 pounds ago. The body's changed. The old gray mare just ain't what she used to be. And, a couple torn Achilles in my older years now, too. It's like, okay, why am I still doing this? These days
Right.
are those glory
Yeah.
days, right, are over.
Yeah. For you, it was Achilles. For me, it was concussions, man. I had a couple of them in a game not too long ago. I'm in my 60s, so I stopped playing.
What what
Was there,
sport
was,
what was sport were you playing that you got concussions, if I can ask?
oh, rugby, man. I was an all Army rugby player. Then I retired from the Army. I played semi pro for a couple of years. And then, me and my buddies, we decided to form a military rugby club, and we play at we 1 or 2 shows. I mean, 1 or 2 tests every year. So we show up, and it's one a year now. I mean, I don't play anymore. We're all social now. I play the bagpipes. I don't even drink anymore, but I just play the bagpipes, drink Diet Cokes, and watch, man. So
Yeah, that's blast. Well,
it
it's funny.
doesn't hurt as much.
Yeah, not to go sideways on our conversation, Bruce, but, when I got done playing, I was a varsity basketball coach, and one of the things I did to inspire my players, my basketball players, was has have them watch Australian rules football and rugby matches. Because I said, "You guys think you're tough? Look at these guys. This Australian rules football and these rugby guys." It's a different mentality, no question about it.
Amen, dude. I always tell football guys, man, you're sport for fat kids, man. I mean, come on, dude. All them, you take breaks every 5 minutes, or not even a play lasts 20 seconds, and you guys are taking breaks, man. So, no, I mean, I love my NFL buddies. Yeah. So, look, quick question. You played in Germany. So, was there any limitations on the amount of Americans that can play on a team?
Yeah, yeah. At that time, there was 2 Americans or 2 foreigners, as I call them, per team. So my teammate was from Clemson. He was a point guard, and then I was a forward over there. And so between both of us, we averaged over 50 points a game. We were the lion's share of the team as far as scoring, which is what you're hired for, right? They hire you for a specific task, typically scoring. And so, yeah, it was a lot of fun. It really was. I mean, it was a pretty low key. It's different than the NBA too, as our schedule was pretty light. We had 1 or 2 games a week. That was it. And so different than an NBA schedule where you're playing 3, 4 nights a week and traveling on the road. It was a pretty light schedule. I had a lot of downtime. And so it would give me a chance to tour, meet a lot of people, got to speak the language. I eventually learned German. So that was a bonus to it, to being able to do that and met a lot of great people. I mean, it's neat because everybody talks about my height, but during that time, and actually before that, when I was in college, I played against a guy 7'8". And you talk about, you know,
Wow.
understanding what people put up with me now. I'm looking up at this guy like, oh my goodness, now I know what everybody has to put up with me as far as normal population. Yeah, and so that's probably one of the biggest things I miss. Similar to the military, it's one of the things, and we'll talk about that later. That's one of the things I miss is that teamwork and being around guys my size and part of the tribe or part of the community or part of the locker room, right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing in that transition that I think we miss as athletes. But I saw a lot of parallels with the military as well when you go through that transition.
Absolutely. Did you have to have an A on your uniform?
No, I did not. No, they just knew I was American because I spoke English.
Okay. So the reason I'm asking is my nephew's a quarterback in the European football and the NFL over there right now. And they have two players on a team, but they have to wear an A. It's like a target, right? Because everybody tries to get the Americans because they're
Right.
better than everybody
They
on the
know.
field, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
they go. So he's the quarterback. He's getting knocked around all the time.
Well, in Bruce, I can, and I guess humbly say that they didn't have to guess who the American was on our team between me and my Clemson teammate because we were lighting it up every night. And
Dude, that's so cool, man. So how long did you do that?
not long enough, as they say, just a couple seasons. I came back for a free agent tryout. I had a free agent tryout out in San Francisco. There was 18 of us by invite. Coaches from all over the nation and the pro leagues came over to watch us. And then I went in for knee surgery, and I knew I injured myself. I had an injury over there. I hyperextended my knee, and I knew right away that it was, a pretty serious injury. But I thought, boy, if I'm going to try it, I got to come back to the States and try to make it over here. So I came back for that tryout. Toughest 3 days of basketball. All I saw was a hotel and a gym for 3 days straight. Went in for knee surgery about a month after that and found out it was time to get a real job. The orthopedic surgeon
Really?
basically said, Kurt, you can keep walking by the time, or not, keep playing and not walk by the time you're 40, or you can give up this game at this level. And so, as a 27, 28-year-old kid, it was kind of a easy choice where it's like, yeah, it's time to move on. And that transition's tough. You're so used to a lifestyle. You're so used to, a certain schedule and the glamour of it all, being somebody, then all of a sudden, who am I again? And what's my purpose? All those things that you lose when you go through that transition.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar when I talk to NFL players, public safety people, police,
Hmm.
firemen, and military guys, right? Is that you do something for a while and then and it brings a lot to your personal identity, right? Whether you're in the
Yes.
military, you're a professional player, or you're a public servant. I mean, that's who you are, right? That becomes you. And then when those days end, it's like so. Yeah, and transition's tough no matter where you are in this world, but it's it is a little bit harder only because the skills that you learn in the military, public safety, and as a professional player usually don't translate to great career opportunities.
Well, and you're one of a minute percent, right? I mean, it's less than 1/10 of 1% that'll make pro athlete and military as well when you talk about special ops or
Mhm.
people that are high caliber type. Yeah, just to throw out some stats at you too, these are stats that were released some years ago by Sports Illustrated. I mentioned about 100% of professional athletes ultimately lose their job. Well, here's the sobering stats about that. 25% of NFL players are broke within the first year out. Think about that, 25%. 75% of NFL players are broke within 2 years out. And it's not much better for the NBA. 60% of NBA players are broke within 5 years. And it's not just about the money, it's relationships. 80% of professional athletes ultimately experience divorce during that transition period. So from job loss to disaster, that's the reality. And so, I see a lot of similar parallels with the military as well, going back to civilian life. You lose that identity. And, the joke between pro athletes and military, though, is that the military say, hey, yeah, but you're not getting shot at. And the pro athletes say, yeah, but you have job security. I could lose my job any day, right?
Yeah.
And
No,
so,
I mean, professional sports is no joke, man. I mean, everybody wants your job. There's always people looking for your job. You got to have your A game on. There's a lot of stress there.
yes.
And those you mentioned a fact earlier, you're talking about the 1/10 of 1% out there. And that's what we're trying to get parents to understand because we are so hyper focused on sports right now. And
Hmm.
it can be any sport. Now, in this program, we're kind of focused on contact sports because they provide a lot of risk. And I say this often, and I don't know if you know this, but in the chronic traumatic encephalopathy brain bank in Boston University, there are no basketball players. There are no
Mm.
baseball players. There are no swimmers, volleyball players, tennis players, golfers, but they are football players, wrestlers, rugby players, hockey players, lacrosse players, soccer
Soccer? I
players.
was just gonna say
Soccer's,
soccer, yeah,
as a matter of fact, soccer next year is supposed to eclipse football for the first time in a number of concussions that we have as a sport. It is a
yeah,
contact sport.
yes.
So, we try to get parents that are so obsessed to understand that, look, all right, you got to get a college ride. Okay. We're working with the sports to make them safer, but your child's not going to be a professional athlete. I'm sorry. Okay. And if they are, they're very, very good, obviously. And they're extremely lucky because you got what they call the injury lottery, right?
Mhm.
Who's going to take it now? Like your knee, right? I mean, what injury is going to happen to what person? And let me ask you a question here. In the NBA, what's the average length of an NBA career? Do you have any
Yeah,
idea what
yeah,
that?
I know overall in pro sports, if you look at the 4 majors, it's 3.2 years, right? So 3.2 years is my small win, and that's the average. That's my window of opportunity to make that kind of money to play at that level. So you think about it, I mean, 3.2 years, that's a small amount of our lifespan, God willing. And so when you look at that, it's like, wow, okay. And that's the average. Now you hear about the guys that are playing 12 years, 15 years, you get a freak every once in a while, like Jerry Rice or Tom Brady that plays in their 40s. But most of the time, people are done in their 20s, mid to early 20s, even sometimes. And so, regardless of the sport, and our bodies are designed to, I guess, I look at my body now the way it is, and it's like, wow, I took a beating during those years, and
Hmm.
now I'm paying for it. I mean, you understand, like you mentioned
Yeah.
from your years of
I got
playing, and
I got shoulder surgery in 2 weeks. My back went out last week. I might have to get that operated on. The other rotator cuff's gone, but it was a
boy.
hell of a ride.
Well, let me put a plug in. Yeah, Bruce, let me put a plug in then because I found something. Let's see, it's been 8 years ago now that changed my body. I mean, I was ready for knee replacement, hip surgery, back, and I found out about stem cell therapy, and so I had stem cell therapy 8 years ago, and it healed my body literally.
Wow.
And so I've been very fortunate. I always encourage people to do their own research, take a look at it.
Yeah.
Some people think, "Oh, it's illegal." No, it's not illegal. It's legal. It's just not insurance doesn't cover it, unfortunately.
Right. Then and what kind of stem cells did you use? Was it adipose, umbilical,
I
or
use the
marrow?
blood cord, yeah, the umbilical cord. So from live
Okay.
birth babies, we made sure
Yeah.
they were live birth babies, and
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
used the umbilical cord. They're the most potent because babies have the most. I mean, all of us have stem cells in our body. It's just as we age, we have less and less because their job is to replenish tissue. I mean, that's their job in our body.
No, yeah. Unfortunately, my rotator cuffs cannot be repaired by stem cells. I have to grow about 3 inches of muscle to get this one to attach, man. But
Yeah.
no, good point. And we have had stem cell folks on, a couple of them on the program so far, talk very, very well about stem cells and how they can be used. And I guess now the industry's kind of moving towards these peptides where a lot of good potential with those as well. I mean, there's a lot of great things out there, and it's very fortunate that you're able to
Yeah,
heal
no,
yourself and keep going.
I'm convinced regenerative medicine is the future of medicine. It's just there's a lot of forces, that go a different direction, and so it's just a matter of how that change is going to happen.
No doubt. Farmer wants us sick forever, dude. And that's the problem when we start talking about mental illness, which is really not too much associated with the NBA and Major League Baseball because of the lack of exposure that the heads have, right?
Hmm.
But on the other side of on the problem, we have mental health problems and you know instead of curing things, everybody, so there's a pill and there's a pill for this, and then that creates symptoms. And whether it's a pro athlete or a veteran, I mean, I've talked to
Hmm.
veterans right now, they're on 15 plus medications
Mm,
because of the damage to their brain that still hasn't been diagnosed. They're just mentally ill. And
hmm.
nobody's trained on the connection between mental illness and a damaged brain. So what
Yeah.
was obviously you had like little to no transition plan when that doctor told you that you better
Yeah. Well,
stop
I'm
playing
glad you
basketball
asked
or
that.
stop walking. So what did you do, man?
Yeah. No,
What was the next step?
this is a perfect segue to what we were just talking about. I took a year off. I mean, I was just not really sure what I wanted to do and just kind of lost and angry and some of those emotions that we go through. But partway through that year, I got tired of being angry and kind of aimless, so I decided to go to graduate school and started a big chunk of my master's in counseling. So I have a master's in counseling. And so kind of down that same line we just talked about, mental health and how that impacts everybody, right? Not just athletes, but military and people that are going through challenges. But that really sent me in a good course because, it really gave me a foundation to say, boy, this is the next phase of my life now. And during that time also, I became a counselor. In fact, I was a middle school counselor is what I did when I was done playing pro ball. And so it was a great experience. I love being around kids. My mom was a teacher, as I mentioned, and a coach. And so it was a great experience. But partway through that transition and through that time, many years later, I had an idea. And that idea was to sit down and interview other former professional athletes and hear about how they successfully transition. And that's what spawned the idea of my first book, From Glory Days, Successful Transitions of Professional Detroit Athletes, in which I interviewed 20 former Detroit Pistons, Tigers, Red Wings, and Lions about their successful transition after pro sports. And that was neat here, sitting down with people that were Hall of Famers, they won World Series, whatever their, accomplishment was, and to hear about how they recreated that success afterwards. And everybody had their own stories about how they did it. And that book turned into a TV show. We did 4 seasons of the TV show, 50 TV interviews. I ended up winning an Emmy Award with my interview with Rocky Blair out of Pittsburgh. Rocky's got an amazing
Rocky.
story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's the guy that made the toe catch, right? And to win the Super Bowl, right?
He,
Yeah,
yeah,
he's Vietnam vet.
He was a Vietnam vet. And a funny story about Rocky, and you'd appreciate this as a military guy. So he got drafted. He won a national championship at Notre Dame, got drafted by the Steelers, played 1 year in the NFL. He's in the locker room, in the Steelers locker room, and a guy walks up with a draft letter, literally. He's in the locker room. He gets the letter, opens it up. It's a Vietnam draft letter. Got to report tomorrow, literally.
Gosh.
And so he contacted the military, said, "Hey, listen, I don't know what happened." And we'll come to find out it was hung up in the Pittsburgh Steeler mailbox for a while, right before they gave it to him. And so they
Wow.
gave him a few extra days, but they're like, "Hey, yeah, you still got to report," right? And so he literally went from the fields of the NFL to the fields of Vietnam and got shot in one leg, hand grenade shrapnel in another leg. Literally, he's sitting in a military hospital in Japan, and the doctor's like, "Oh, yeah, you'll walk again." And he's like, "Walk? I wanna play football." He's like, "You'll never play football again." Rocky came back and won 4 Super Bowls after that, and so just an amazing story. And, the war hero, obviously multi-Super Bowl champion, and now he's a speaker, travels all over, has a couple companies that he runs in Pittsburgh and just, tells his story. He ribs not Tarkington, Bradshaw a lot. I guess that's how he on his presentations, he does a lot of ripping of Bradshaw, who was the quarterback at that time, and so but
Well,
yeah,
I
just
think no, keep going, sorry.
it was a great opportunity for me to be able to sit down and interview athletes with the book, interview them for the TV show, and it was honestly kind of therapeutic for me as well to hear their stories because I was able to resonate and recognize a lot of those aspects.
Yeah, it was actually Rocky Blair's, Super Bowl teams that got the whole CTE thing going on with Mike Webster and,
Webster, yeah,
can't
tragic.
remember. Yep, can't remember a couple of the other players, one that died in that horrible suicide crash with the gasoline truck, but they basically were the ones that got, at least the awareness of CTE going, which then led to the understanding now that it's not about concussions. It's about all those little hits we take or all those blasts that we take as veterans that are messing our brains up. And it's amazing that what was Mr. Blair's position in football? Was
Yeah,
he a
he was
running
a
back?
running back. Yeah, he was a running back,
Yeah.
exactly. So he
Boy,
was getting a
for
lot of hits. Yeah,
yes,
a lot of
yeah,
hits.
he was. He
Well, it's
played for a
interesting.
while too.
And interesting because one of the guys interviewed was Lem Barney. He was a Hall of Fame Detroit Lion, and Lem was Rookie of the Year, played 10 seasons with the Detroit Lions. And years later, he was telling me about how he went in to get a CAT scan, right? And the neurologist at that time said, "Boy, you've had 8 concussions, huh?" And he's like, "No, what are you talking about?" He says, "Yeah, here's one here, here's one here, here's one here." And he's like, he had no idea. He said he remembers a couple times being knocked out, right, being blacked out. And at that time, you just kind of get some smelling salts and get back in the game, basically. And so, but yeah, he was shocked by that. And now, unfortunately, he has some cognitive issues as a result of those throughout all those years.
Absolutely, and that's an unfortunate side of this issue is that a lot of times, like, I had a mental health breakdown 3.5 years ago. Turned out, once I educated the VA that, 21 years of military service, Green Beret, parachute jumps, 4 different combat zones, and throw on a rugby career. You
Mhm.
know, not good for the brain, but it takes time to catch up to you, even if you're
Mhm.
take care of yourself. And that's unfortunate to hear. And I'll say a prayer for him. I just,
Yeah, I appreciate that.
it's just, but it is a side effect of these sports that we're trying to make society aware of, not to, you know, to cancel sports or anything like that. It's like, how do we make them safer?
Right.
And that all comes down to starting later and then reducing the amount of contacts we have. Because, I mean, as a basketball player, I mean, how many thousands of free throws did you make, to keep that arc and to make sure that
Right.
they went through that net,
Well, part of
right?
part of my workout routine when I was playing at the highest level was I had to make 10 free throws with my eyes closed before I could leave the gym. I mean, literally, it was muscle memory.
In a
And
row?
so yeah, oh yeah, 10 free throws in a row with my eyes closed. It was that, rigid that, hey, you gotta get this down so it's like nothing, right? And so and that was just me. Other people do different things. Some people have to have so many dribbles in or so many, whatever it is, layups but for me, it was I had to make 10 free throws with my eyes closed, in a row before I could leave the gym. And many times I would spend hours there. It's like, oh, I can't
Right?
leave yet. And
Trying to get
so,
it
and I
done.
always believe you had to finish on a make, or regardless of the workout. And so it was always finish on a make. And so, but it's interesting because I've talked to some good friends of mine that literally their personalities have changed. Like a good friend of mine, he was married over 30 years, played football, played baseball in college, All-American, played professional baseball. And then all of a sudden his personality started changing and ended up getting a divorce. It was really fortunate because he's a good guy, but you could see the personality change happening many years later. And unfortunately, too, a lot of these athletes, and I'm sure military self-medicate, right? That's their way of coping
Yeah.
with some of the challenges that they have, and they turn to that as a result. And you and I know that those directions are not healthy because those can, whatever happens as a result of that as well, depending on the self medication that they're doing. But it's unfortunate. And so, what I appreciate about what you're doing, Bruce, is it's awareness. Getting awareness. It's not just contact sports, but like you said, the concussion of military, things that are loud. Yeah, I've gotten my teeth knocked out, or tooth knocked out at least. I've got my teeth knocked around, but I had one totally knocked out of my mouth. And so, there's no question there was a concussion type reaction to that as well. But yeah, it regardless of the sport, I think the biggest thing is people, especially parents. I think that's the biggest thing. Parents being aware, and I know there's more and more programs that are trying to head this off, no pun intended, but they're trying to head it off by having scans or, boy, let's do more protocols for concussion. Like our daughter plays soccer. She's going to college. In fact, here's a little shout out. She'll be in Florida next year playing out at Daytona State, who just won a
Oh, there you go.
they just won a national championship back to back. And so she'll be down
Dude.
there next year. But my point is, even in soccer, she's had to sit out for a concussion she had a couple years ago, and I'm just always concerned about that of the long-term effects.
Yeah,
And so,
we just had a guest on the show that was talking about how you can have a concussion, and if you're not sleeping right, I mean, they're talking months after the concussion, the same symptoms of that concussion will come back under sleep
mm,
deprivation. And these are things that parents aren't looking for, like your buddy that changed his personality. We have, I don't know how many, individuals that have played a lot of contact sports, and you just name your sport. All of a sudden, they go through these personality challenges, and they, bad business decisions and marital breakups or whatever, and their lives just go down the tube. And nobody is, they're just saying, "Oh, you're crazy," or whatever their thing is, but nobody's saying, could it have been contact sports? Was it
mhm,
football? Because there's no awareness about this out there. And some people say, probably could he played a lot of football, and they'll get poo-pooed or nah, because this is one of those monkey see, monkey do things, right?
mhm,
People do not want to see this truth because guys like me have to own up to the fact, and I own this, that I allowed my son to play too many contact sports. I did not know it hurt him. I would have never allowed him to play him. But I'm the guy that said, yeah, you want to play football? Okay, let's go. Let's get you the best helmets. Didn't know that the helmets are only designed to protect the skull, but they don't stop the brain from shifting
right,
all the time. So
right,
we've got millions of parents in this country making uninformed decisions that impact the entire futures of their children.
mhm,
And that's why when we hear these stories about people with personality changes and they go through life and they don't even get any closure, now they think they're crazy, right? But they don't know it was from football or whatever. But the awareness, from the professional side of things, that is getting the attention it needs, right? These ball players do know they're dinged up, and
Yeah.
there's a price to pay for that. What they don't know is that they can be treated.
Hmm.
And that's where things start. That's where we can really make a change. But in your talks with these players, what do you think was the most common denominator, personality wise, or what allowed them when so many other athletes can't make that transition? I mean, I'm talking. I have a buddy right now that had four NFL players on a high school team, all of them suffering from astute mental illness, can't
Mm.
get going. They didn't make they didn't make the 4 years to get their benefits from the NFL, because that's they're the house, right?
Right.
They know
Yeah.
3.2, like you said, 3.2,
Yeah.
3.5, it ain't 4. Okay.
Right.
So they don't get any benefits. They're out there trying to figure out how to get going all over again. And you talk to a bunch of amazing, successful athletes. What did
Yeah, boy, there's actually 5 things I discovered by interviewing these athletes and looking at my own life as well, that there was 5 commonalities of success that these athletes did to find success again. And the first one, I call them my 5 rules of success. In other words, I'm kind of a simple guy, so I had to think of an acronym to try to remember what the 5 things were. So I created a word, rules, RULES, because we have rules of life, we have rules in sports. So these are the 5 rules for success when transitioning. And to be honest, these can be applicable to anybody going through a change, whether it be an organization, an individual from sports. I mean, I speak to a lot of pro sports teams, youth sports teams, but I also speak to companies and corporations that are going through change. And so the first R stands for refocus. What I've discovered, Bruce, is that everybody going through a transition has a period of refocus. This is where you take a look at your current goals and say, what are my new goals? I'll give you a great example. I had an Olympic athlete out of Houston that reached out to me. He says, hey, I heard you're the guy that deals with sports transition. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. He says, well, I just won a medal in Olympics. And I'm like, okay, you have my attention. And he's like, yeah, I don't know what I want to do. So we started talking about his gifts and abilities and what does he enjoy and what does he like? And, because it's so easy as an athlete to develop goals. I mean, it really is. As an athlete, in the military, you have clear objectives, right? Those are your goals, your objectives. And so post sports, post military, coming up with ideas of, boy, what is it that I want to do? What is it that I feel like my gifts are and my abilities? And that's the refocus period. It's kind of a strategic plan. That's the very first step, getting clarity on that of what is my next step. Here's what I've found from the athletes that I've interviewed, though, is that the athletes that have a degree of some type have something to fall back on at least. Maybe they don't do what their degree was, but at least they had something to fall back on. I found that commonality because those athletes that had a degree to say, boy, I got a degree in communications, or I got a degree in business, or I have this degree. Well, at least they could fall back on that as part of their transition period. The ones that didn't have a degree, really, they were like, I don't know. All I know is sports. I've been doing this since I've been 10 years old, right? And so having that refocus is very important. The next letter U stands for using your network. In other words, we all have a vast network of people around us, internally, externally. And once we have clarity of what our refocus is, our new goals, our new passion and purpose, we have to tap into our network to say, hey, listen, this is what I'm looking at doing now. A great example of that is I had a former Detroit Red Wing that he got his financial advising Series 7 license. And he went out to all of his network and said, hey, listen, I'm no longer playing pro soccer. I'm a financial advisor. If I can help you, let me know. Which brings up an important part. When you're using your network, it's not using and abusing people. It's creating win-win relationships. And he was
yeah,
looking for ways to help people. Hey, I got this knowledge. If you're interested, and his business skyrocketed as a result of him tapping into that network as a result. So refocusing, which helps create that passion and purpose in our lives again, which is very important for athletes and military and people that are high caliber type people. We need that passion and purpose, and then using our network to tap into it to say, hey, this is what I'm doing now. Any ideas, or where can I go from here? Is there connections? The next letter, L, bar none, without a challenge, is the most difficult to do, at least for pro athletes. Letting go, letting go. It's in the marrow of our bone to never give up, right? We fall down 7, get up 8. That's kind of the mentality that we have. And so letting go is very difficult. However, it is probably one of the most important emotional aspects of a transition, is to let go of the fact that, hey, I'm done. I'm no longer a pro basketball player. I'm no longer a high caliber military. And sometimes letting go means letting go of successes as well as our failures. Maybe it's a type of thinking, well, I don't think I can do this. Sometimes we have to let that go. A great example of that is everybody's different. Everybody's different with their own timetable, kind of like grief. Everybody has their own timetable. I had a pro baseball player that his agent reached out to me and said, "Hey, my pitcher just got released in spring training. Can you sit down with him?" So I sat down with him. I started working through these 5 rules, got to letting go. Within 2 weeks, he goes, "Kurt, I'm done. I'm done playing pro baseball." He had clarity of what his refocus was, where he was going to be. He started tapping those network. Boom. He was moving on within 2 weeks. To the contrary, I've talked to guys 10 years later that they still haven't let go, right? Hey, I still can play. Well, not according to the league, you can't, right?
Yeah.
They would have called
Yep.
you by now.
Yep. You'd
But
be out there.
seriously, though, yeah, so everybody has their own timetable, but letting go is so important because it's an emotional aspect of moving forward. The E, the RULE, stands for execute your plan. And the reason why that's there is because as we have a refocus and develop our plan and strategic plan, typically it's not one and done. We don't have this plan, we don't execute it, and all of a sudden it's all done. Rarely do we do that as a person. We have to sometimes adapt, we have to adjust. I like using the PDCA process, which stands for plan, do, check, and adjust. In other words, you make your plan, which is your refocus. You do it, you check the results, and this is where the haves from the have-nots separate. You adjust and do it all over again. And as a result, you execute your plan, and that plan might mean adapting a little bit as you have planned on doing one thing, but oh boy, I got to adapt it and try something else as a result. Very important of aspect of that transition. The last letter, RULES, stands for someone. What I've discovered is athletes and people of high caliber that had a transition have found someone, a mentor, so to speak, that helped them transition. Maybe it was not somebody necessarily older, but somebody that is where they want to be. And as a result, they were able to get through that quicker because they had that mentor that helped them through that. So those are the 5 commonalities that I discovered with that transition. So RULES.
That's amazing. And I think that I think a lot of our folks that listen to this show, military and, athletes as well, have a lot to learn from that because it's not just professional athletes. By the time, I talked, gosh, man, when my son played high school football, all the dads, all they could talk about was all they did in high school. I mean, they're still telling football stories for crying out loud. And if you make it into college, you know less. So the letting go applies not just to professionals, it's everybody. I would add another R to your first R, especially if you played contact sports and if you're a military guy, and that's recovery. It's like you've got to
Hmm.
get your brain right. If your
Right.
brain has been beaten around to the point where you're having issues, go get those fixed because we now know there are all kinds of modalities out there because you can't execute the 5 rules without a functioning mechanism up here, right? Your brain
Hmm.
housing group that's in good shape. And
Hmm.
so there's a lot of things we can do now. If you played football or wrestling, not we, but there's out there that we can put that brain back in order so that you can execute that transition plan because it is so important, and I'm glad you brought that up because, a lot of the folks that, listen to this and we all need transition. You could transition from a career for crying out loud, but understanding how successful people do it is, I mean, I was unemployed for a year. I was so depressed, I was a Green Beret sergeant major pirate ship captain, and I could not get a job. I was literally getting ready to become Paul Blart. I was going to
Hmm.
be a mall cop. I was at Walmart security with a master's degree and a security clearance. I could not find a job. This is pre 9/11, but still, it was devastating. I just got married. I had 2 children. I couldn't, I had my pension, but I couldn't get a job. And that's why I started playing semi-pro rugby, and I didn't get paid. It was just, it was just horrible. But no, I really appreciate you bringing that up. So, Kurt, as we get ready to close out, I like to offer our guests the time to talk about themselves. Right? How do people find you? What do you have going on? What's next? What's the next chapter for Kurt David? And so go ahead, let us have it, man. What's going on?
Yeah, yeah, no, I appreciate that question. Well, people can find me at kurtdavid.com. That's the easiest thing, kurtdavid.com, the website. I'm on LinkedIn. I live on LinkedIn as well. If you find me, Kurt A. David. I use the A simply because a lot of people confuse my first and last name. Sometimes they
Okay,
call me
yeah.
David. Yeah, and so I use the A for formal
I would do that.
introductions, Kurt A. David. So yeah, if you go on LinkedIn, Kurt A. David, you'll find me there. But yeah, just Google me. You'll find all the fun stuff I'm doing. What I found though, and one of my new passions is that we literally have found a lot of parallels between what military go through and what pro athletes go through in that transition. And so, we have the radio show From Glory Days Veterans Edition. In fact, we just had Denny on, and it was a great interview hearing him talk about his transition and life.
Denny's
And
awesome.
yeah, absolutely. And so I'm so glad for that introduction. And so we, want to continue helping veterans as well, understanding that the successes that they can have. So we've done probably 80 different radio interviews and podcast interviews of veterans and how they've recreated that success and what they're doing now. So, yeah, if you go to kurtdavid.com, you'll see the connection to the TV show. You'll see the connection to the radio show. I also
Uh,
do speaking on the topic of change and transition using my 5 commonalities, as well as how do you lead change? How do you communicate change? So tapping some of my counseling background as well as communication and how do we communicate while we're changing. And so it's, my passion and purpose is to serve others and serve God, right? I mean, using the gift and abilities that I
Amen.
have. And so
Amen.
that's my purpose while I still have breath, is to help others and use the gifts and abilities that I've been provided.
Well, it's obvious that the Lord's blessed you with the passion and commitment to help others, and that's exactly what you're doing. I mean, change to our audience out there is scary no matter what you're looking at, and sometimes we all need somebody to talk to. Based on your story, Mr. David, you're highly recommended out there. Now we have another person that we can all reach out to, and thank you for your support of our veteran communities. It's they need that help and they need that attention because there are we have the same problem as professional athletes. A lot of our military veterans struggle with transition. They just can't get going. My stepson, he wants to get back in the military because it's so different out here in the civilian
Yeah.
world, right? But may the Lord bless you for what you're doing right now. And I hope your journey continues to be a peaceful and productive one. And look forward to talking to you and meeting you someday for sure.
No, I appreciate it. Likewise as well, Bruce. Appreciate what you're doing.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. Well, folks, another awesome edition. And that was kind of like a self-guided, kind of like a self-help tour here on the Broken Brains, man, which is awesome, man. This is great. It's a great to be able to benefit our audience in so many ways out there. Don't forget, the book Broken Brains is free on our website. Okay, please get informed on this issue of repetitive brain trauma. And please understand what's going out there. Take the podcast wherever you want, like it, love it, pass it around, let people know that we're out there. And we have, an amazing platform for folks to become aware of this issue and how it's impacting our children, veterans, and athletes. And we have to make those societal changes that are necessary to make sports safer, to protect our military, but most importantly, to understand now that we can treat these brains and we don't have to suffer in silence anymore. And if you are suffering, please reach out, talk to somebody. There is help, there is hope, and you can leverage our network for nothing. We'll send you wherever you want. We've got a nationwide network of specialists and treatments out there. You can get the help you need. So till then, till next time, Broken Brains, thank you all. Remember, if you've got children or if you've played sports, you only got one melon, so take care of it. May the Lord bless you all, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of Broken Brains. Take care.